Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Indigemedia, Navigating Native American Representation in Film and Media. My name is Julia. I use she, they pronouns. I am Diné and Blackfeet, and I am an intern for the American Indian Resource Center. Tonight's event will feature Native Americans who work in the media industry, discussing the importance of representation and their own personal experiences facing stereotypes, overcoming barriers, and ways they think we can begin to change the narrative of the historically inaccurate representation of Native Americans in the industry. Myself and Saxon will be moderating the panel and then open it up to an audience Q&A.
Hi, everyone. My name is Saxon, they, them pronouns. I am Diné, Pascuayaqui, and Hopi, and I am affiliated with the Student Union Assembly at UC Santa Cruz as a Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion. As Julia just said, we will both be moderating the panel. We thank everyone for attending and appreciate the panel for generously taking time out of their busy schedule to speak with us. This event has been co-sponsored by the Student Alliance of North American Indians, the American Indian Resource Center, and the SCOA Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and UCSC Career Success.
Before we begin, we'd like to let everyone know that we are recording tonight's event.
We will now begin with the UCSC land acknowledgement. UC Santa Cruz is located on the unceded territory of the Awaswa-speaking Yupi tribe. The Amamusin tribal band, comprised of the descendants taken to Mission Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma.
We will now welcome in our panel for tonight's event. We'll be reading their bios and then giving them a short time to introduce themselves. So our first panelist is Sivan Alyra Rose. Sivan Alyra Rose was raised on the San Carlos Apache Reservation. She is an Apache and Puerto Rican actress, runway model, and exhibited artist. Sivan is the first Native American female lead of a television series called Chambers, which aired on Netflix in 2019. Sivan is passionate about utilizing her platform to raise awareness about Native American issues, especially the need for mental health care support and resources for Native American youth. We are so happy to have you here tonight, Sivan.
Happy to be here and thank you for having me. I'm excited. Yes, hello, my name is Sivan Alyra Rose. I'm an artist, I'm an actress, and I'm a runway model. But most importantly, I am a San Carlos Apache woman, and I am very happy to be here tonight to share my knowledge and whatever I've learned.
Our next panelist is Jason Gavin, writer and producer. Jason Gavin is a Blackfeet writer and producer whose many credits include Netflix's Chambers, Roswell, New Mexico, and Friday Night Lights, for which he received 2 Writers Guild Best Drama nominations. Jason has served as chair of the Writers Guild of America's Native American and Indigenous Writers Committee. After graduating from Harvard University, he worked on Capitol Hill and across Indian country, representing numerous Native nonprofit organizations. Please welcome Jason Gavin.
And would you like to speak? Okay, so finally, our last panelist is Tazbah Rose Chavez. Tazbah is a performance poet turned television writer and film director. She is a citizen of the Bishop Paiute tribe from the Numu, Diné, and San Carlos Apache people. Tazbah has written for Sci-Fi's Resident Alien, Peacock's Rutherford Falls, and is currently a co-producer on FX's new series, Reservation Dogs. She holds a degree in American Indian Studies from UCLA and serves as the co-chair of the Native American and Indigenous Writers Committee at the Writers Guild of America. Please welcome Tazbah.
Manahu, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. Julia gave me a great, thorough, brief introduction. I'm really excited to be here talking to you about our experiences navigating Native representation. I look forward to it.
Thank you. We'll now begin the panel.
So welcome panelists. First and foremost, we are so happy to have you here tonight. If y'all are open to it, let's get started with our first question. So our first question tonight is, what inspired you to get involved in the media industry? And we can start with whoever.
Volunteer Jason.
Okay. I would say that, like most people, I think when you get into it, you probably like I always loved creative stuff, no matter what it was. And you know, also I just think like growing up, we all consume so much of it. We see how you know, important it is, and informing our opinions on things. I almost never saw natives in TV or movies when I was a kid. When we did, it was something rare, and if they even got it halfway right, it was some like amazing accomplishment. And you could tell that like a lot of natives weren't involved in it. In my first career, I worked on behalf of tribal colleges on Capitol Hill, and one thing I noticed was, you know, you end up a lot of times sort of being a translator in that job between institutions in Indian country and a very big mainstream institution like our federal government that has had so much influence on Native lives. And that can be for good or for bad. And a lot of times it was like really poorly done. What I noticed was there was a ton of just ignorance from really educated people, our leaders, about when it came to Indians. And that had really, as we all know as Native people, that had really concrete, incredibly bad consequences on us. What I saw was a lot of those folks had learned what little they knew about Natives, and most of it was wrong, from our mainstream media. So when I came out here, that kind of dovetailed into wanting to do something about that. And you know, it's been a bit of a slog as we've worked our way into getting greater and more accurate representation, but I'm really optimistic about where we are now.
I can go. So for me, I think oh my gosh, there's this car outside that has been holding their hand on the horn on and off for like
No decency.
Is that loud?
Okay.
Okay, so what inspired me? Actually, my name inspired me because I previously in my former life, I worked in beauty care, and I worked for a beauty care brand, and I was an educator for them. So I spent like 12 years in beauty care, seeing all these beauty campaigns that never featured brown women, let alone like Native women. That was just never going to happen. And part of my job the last 6 years was 75% travel, where I was traveling like all over the country, like educating all these women on like leadership development and like business acumen and like how to keep your hair from being frizzy. And what happened to me during that time period is I was interacting with a lot of people who I had to give my name to. So that was for like checking in for a flight, that was checking into a hotel, that was like getting picked up by Uber before you could like change your name. That was meeting people constantly. And like the one thing that sort of always started to come up was like, you know, people would always like, oh, well, what's your name? And when I would tell them, it was like they had no idea that we were still alive or like existed. And so I was just finding myself in this constant place of having to like educate people on our existence. And it's like, you know, I knew that population, but I'm like res born and raised. Like, so I grew up predominantly with my own people. That was never an issue. And so when I went away to school and I was at UCLA, that's really the first place I encountered it. But I still had like some Native student bodies surrounding me. So I always still had people around me. But when I went off into this like solo career and I traveled all over the country and the world for it, and all of these people were like, oh, you guys are still alive, or like, what's that? Or like, you know, and for me, I was like, wow, like we really are invisible. And so I had made my first short films when I was like 16, and kind of, you know, went to school and kind of moved away from that. You know, it was like film and writing, and I'm primarily a performance poet first and foremost, but I kind of, you know, those were like that was like my hobby, or that was the thing that I did on the side while this other thing paid my bills. But really, I got to this place where I was just like, the way that I feel like I can make impact and change that even is affecting like law and policy and the way we're perceived. To me, like media is like one of the strongest ways that people learn about other people. And I had this big idea that I would like go to school and be a lawyer and I'd like win the land back. But then I was like, well, maybe I can like win perspective back. And so it was like a combination of like all of those things that really inspired me, you know, to jump off the cliff and dive into this industry where there's no guarantees to try and change the Native narrative.
I share similar sentiments with Jason and Tazbah about like, I came to an awareness of there was a lack of Native Americans in the industry. So what inspired me to get involved in the industry was I had been working on and off as a model, and in the same fashion in most other sectors, there's just a complete lack of representation. And as I got older and I was making more decisions for myself, becoming an adult, choosing independence, I considered acting because I truly did know that's somewhere I haven't seen myself. I imagine I could get an audition somehow. So, you know, I might as well pursue that course while the opportunity is right. So I share the sentiment that the just straight up not seeing yourself, like, and then wanting to make an impact, you know, in the change of perception. That's totally what drove me to pursue endeavors outside of like where Native Americans are usually expected or whatever to like go in career-wise.
Thank you for sharing those perspectives. I feel like they're all pretty universal for Natives. And it's great that you're dedicating your lives, or at least your work lives, to changing the narrative. Our second question is, what has been the most challenging thing about being involved in the media industry so far?
The educating. I've heard, we all basically said it. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things I do get sick of constantly, is having to be the history book for my own, just me, like here, like just me sitting in the room is going to bring up a million questions sometimes. And that alone is quite the pressure inducing environment. So, you know, I'm hoping a lot more self-education, a lot more within education in like the schools and in media. There's a lot more non-natives taking that time to educate themselves so that Native people don't have to be, you know, the bearers of trauma in just a room, and we got to be having a good time, you know.
I would say it's the I think one of the things that a lot of us have to do in just like regular life, which is kind of balancing the Native with the kind of like, you know, whatever we want to call it, the mainstream, the dominant thing, and in establishing a career, trying to demonstrate to people that you can do both, because this is an industry that really wants to pigeonhole people. It's, you know, a lot of times it's like, you know, we can feel like we're just like pieces that are getting put into these projects where they need writers and actors and stuff, and they want to be able to encompass you in like, you know, 2 or 3 sentences, like in a much worse way than like our bios to you guys. You guys know we're a lot more than that. But so I think it's the challenge of being able to, as a writer, or, you know, I'd say this probably extends to actors and everyone else, be someone who is like, I really want to do Native content. I also want to be able to do the other type of content and prove myself in that arena, because that a lot of times wins you accolades that can allow you, give you the leverage to do the other stuff, so that people aren't assuming like, oh, it's going to be a Native project, so it won't be that good, or it doesn't. And we want to go in and improve ourselves and all that. So it's the balancing of those things and being like, yes, I'd like to be able to do a project, you know, whether as a writer or an actor, where it's like a thoroughly Native project, and then another one where maybe you're just a soldier who it's incidental, you know, and you bring your natural perspective to it. Being able to do that in a career is really, I think, the goal for a lot of us, because it fully realizes things.
I agree with both Sivan and Jason on both of those things. So I'll take something new that's not that they haven't spoken on. I think one of the most challenging things is you have to, because there's so few of us right now, and you know, luckily the numbers are growing, which is very exciting. But part of there not being a lot of us in the media industry, you have to wear a lot of hats and be a lot of things. And so like what I mean by that is, you know, in generals, which, you know, you take when you're meeting all sorts of people across the industry, a lot of times, like Jason was saying, it's like they want to know, do like, we kind of have to be like, I'll do it, I'll write anything, like because there's not a lot. So it's like, oh, you need a native writer for a horror drama, I could figure it out. Oh, you need like someone to write a 30-minute comedy, I'll figure that out too. Oh, you need a drama writer, I'll figure that out. Because other
real one right there.
it's like, if you're not figuring it out, like then there's not going to be a native in that room or on that project. And so even on the directing side, it's like I get you know, meetings and inquiries for like, do you want to do a documentary? Do you want to try and do this drama or these things? And so you kind of do have to like put on all these different hats and sort of be a jack of all trades in many ways, just because there's not enough of us to get really specific on like, oh, I only do like this one thing. And I hope that we get there eventually. But right now, I think all of us that are in the entertainment industry, we're all working in all of these different places just to keep like the wheels turning of having our voice in the room. And then to Sivan's point, I wanted to just kind of piggyback on that one. She talked about like the pressure of like when you're the native in the room. And part of that pressure also is that depending on if you're the only one, or even if you're one of a few, there is this pressure that you are supposed to like know everything about all natives, right? And we know that we're incredibly diverse across the country. And so we don't have all the answers. I don't know how this tribe does it over here, but what I can do is I can find you a legitimate consultant or cultural person or culture keeper who can work with us. And so there's a lot of responsibility that comes with telling these stories. And again, you don't want to not be in that room, because it will be horrific if someone's not, who doesn't have the responsibility or like the understanding of nuance. But it does take you having to kind of request things that, depending on your level, you might not quite feel comfortable doing yet. But it's like, so there's just a lot of responsibility to get the thing right. And when you're the only native in the room, that's a lot. And I've even been on shows where there's more than one native and it's still a lot. So, you know, we want to do right by our people all the time, and there is an impossibility to that. And I think that is challenging.
Thank y'all so much for your insight on this. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that sometimes when you are the educator while also the actor, the playwright, the producer, the director, it is that difficult juxtaposition of prioritizing not only yourself, but also your own heritage, and being in that room as potentially the only one. Thank you for your insight on that. And our next question is actually the opposite side of Julia's question, which is, what are some of the greatest rewards of being in the media industry?
I would say being able to juggle all those challenges and be successful, at least in the end result of it not being perfect, because I don't think any of us feel like we've pulled off something that, like, you know, wow, that's amazing. I think, you know, when you start as a writer or, you know, actor, director, you're generally starting with nothing, a blank page, and you're kind of through this like collective magic building something. We a lot of times always end up looking at the things that are missing or that we didn't quite get, because there are 100 things that happen that change it, where, you know, for all these different reasons beyond your control, it ends up not being exactly precisely what you would have intended. But it feels successful. I think being able to create something that was at least better than what's done before, and then have it seen by younger people who we have faith are going to do it better than we've been able to do, and being part of that process of evolution and improving things. That feels like really, really good, when we looked at things being like done so poorly in the past, and now we're doing, you know, a better job and things that, you know, make us feel a little bit better about it, but knowing where it's headed, which is a challenge to everyone watching.
I feel in a way that one of the greatest rewards is being able to bring a project as such just back to my community and the community, Indigenous community in America in general. You know, it's rare the content comes through, and you can see it every time something with an Indigenous story or an Indigenous actor, writer, something within a bigger budget gets down. You see Indian country get behind it. You know what I mean? Everyone gets excited to just even view and to take in something, because it's rare, I feel like, we get to take in things. And that's something I'm tired of saying, by the way, in 2021. I'm totally manifesting like thousands of more projects because I'm tired of this, but I am always excited to bring it home. That's one thing. I love being able to go, I did something new, you guys want to see it? You know, that's something I want to be able to keep saying.
There's a lot of rewarding things, so I'll try to keep it brief because I'm long-winded and a little bit delirious right now. Okay, one, I had to make notes so I could keep on track. To Sivan's point, having your own people see it and relate to it. Like, the greatest reward to me is like when Native people, especially from your own community, like cry, laugh, get it. When people are sending you things that you don't know across Indian country, and they're like, I feel seen, I feel heard, this was amazing. Like, that to me is like the best feeling that's the best reward. And it's like, also there's this, as an artist, like seeing your story on screen, like seeing something you wrote and when you were out of sleep and, you know, tired, and you're hoping it makes it through, because the thing with like TV is like things change constantly. You don't know that first draft you turn in that you busted your ass for is ever going to end up on screen. And so when you see it, it's very rewarding as the artist in us to see that thing actually make it to the final cut. And then I think the last thing to me, not the only last thing, but like something else that's really rewarding to me is when you've changed somebody's mind that you work with about Native people, or you've changed the perception by nature of working together. And I'll give you an example. I had a white woman writer that I worked with on a show. I love her. She's amazing. And, you know, months went by, the show ended, and she messaged me one day and she's like, hey, I read this thing and I don't feel like it's right based on the things that we talked about and that you said in the room. And I don't know if I have the room to say it to this person, but based on the way they're portraying this character, I want to say something that I don't think it's right. And it feels so good to have like people who can go out and do that work for you now, where all I have to say is, yeah, it's actually not right. I would love if you talk to her. And then you have these people who have changed, who have learned something, or they've changed their mind about something. And then you have all of these like amazing allies like out there, like telling showrunners that they can't portray us like that anymore. So that's really rewarding as well.
If I could interject something really quick, because I love to get mushy and sentimental. I'm a Cancer, it's my thing. But I just want to focus on too, that it's very rewarding to be in these spaces with other Indigenous creatives. Y'all, you like Tazbah, Jason, they're writing, they're producing, like that's very rewarding. Like to even be able to watch content that had a grain of salt that understands me, I think that's super dope. I'm all about like, you know, everyone eats, or, you know, like we ain't eating at all. That's kind of my thing.
I agree. Plus, Sivan gave me my first moment of being seen as a res kid with hot Cheetos. So.
Well, thank you all for sharing. I know it's hard being in the position that you three are in, feeling like you have the responsibility of our entire community on your backs, but all the answers you gave are just reminders that you are making huge changes in the industry. And our last panel question, then we'll move into the audience question, is since we're here today to talk about Native representation in the media, can each of you share one example of successful representation?
I was really proud of what we achieved on Chambers, and that was a really challenging thing. Yes, shout out. That was the first series that had a Native writer, Native director, Native lead, which, you know, and I think we can say as kind of folks who are inside the process, just having that participation at all of those crucial stages all along makes a world of difference. It's you know, it is far different than bringing in a Native consultant at the, you know, day before you're going to shoot it or anything. It's like, I think all of us, Sivan can speak to it as well, we're able to bake some of our stuff into the DNA, and it wasn't easy. That was something that was already rolling when I came in. And just to share like a quick story about it, it was initially the character was from a different tribe, and so there was a really challenging thing of like, I thought it could make sense to have it be a Navajo character. But, you know, that's not my tribe. I've married into a family of Navajos. I know a ton of cultural information and feel like but those are the kind of decisions you have to make, because, you know, it's a big responsibility. And, you know, these are things, one of the biggest challenges for all of us is, like, many times we're not making a documentary, we're making these, you know, narratives that are dramatic or comedic, and that can be like really cool and put, you know, like make them really compelling. But a lot of times those things end up skipping important information because you just like leave a lot of stuff out, because, you know, you're not watching Grey's Anatomy to learn how to be a doctor. You're not watching a law show to learn how to go and do it. And a lot of times they take shortcuts, they take liberties. And that's always the sort of like danger, because we've always been, you know, kind of done wrong by Hollywood. But I thought, you know, we were really able to bring a lot of reality to it. And again, you know, you never get it perfect, and there's not a consensus about how to do it. But I thought we were able to bring something that hadn't been done that way before, and give a foundation where people, you know, could see, again, get like people from the community watching it and saying that was cool, and knowing that like tons of those kids are going to go on and make their own stuff. That was really awesome.
Since you know, you brought up Chambers, I'm very proud of that. It's my feat of representation. It's my baby, and I hope to take care of it as long as I am just, you know, of sane mind. But one of the successes I thought was really interesting in like Indigenous like industry is Ray Zaragoza, who is a recording artist, like record label, like part of a label recording artist. She is scoring a new Netflix show called Spirit Rangers. It's for children. And like, that's something I feel like I'm excited to see, even though it's for kids. I'm like, wow, look, I'm just so happy to see the branching of representation, truly meaning natives can just do the damn job, you know? We bring that flavor and that touch of our tribes, our heritage, our culture, but we can do the damn job. And, you know, that's what I'm excited to see. So I guess besides, makes me really excited to see in the industry.
Well, I thought Chambers was amazing because it was the first time we got to see a Native teenager just be a teenager, which is so important. And you guys pulled that off beautifully. I binged that the first day it came out, and I loved it. So I think that to me is like a good current reference of like how you can do it and do it right, where like it was a character who was a regular teenager, but also was culturally sound, which I think is so important, because a lot of times like things that come across, like scripts that come across, there's, I think non-native writers in Hollywood has this thing of like, you can't be around your reality all day, or you're disconnected and you're trying to discover yourself. And the truth is like, most of us know who we are, and we're just like everybody else. And so I think you guys did a really good job pulling that off. And so I for that.
I really appreciate you saying that, because that's something I did take into consideration when working through the character as Sasha. And I did want her to be a character. I was like, it's really easy to just be myself and do these lines, right? But I wanted to create an embodiment of the res girl in my mind, you know? The culture is there. You don't gotta pull it out of me. Like, don't worry about it. It's gonna be there. But watch her love Instagram, love her boyfriend, be in drama, you know, that's something. So thank you for even acknowledging that.
Well, thank you y'all so much. With our panel questions now out of the way, first and foremost, this has been so far a very empowering discussion, and I'm so giddy just watching all this go on. In part of what actually, you know, for Indigemedia, one of the first things that came into my head was Chambers, because I remember when the news came out that we had our first Native lead, our first Native writer and producer, I audibly gasped. Like, I was in bed, and when I read the news that this was going to happen, like this was like a year and a half ago, around that earlier, and I was so pleased to see that there is that representation, because representation so matters a lot. And yeah, I am just in awe. But we're now going to begin the Q&A session, and these questions have been compiled from the ones our audience tonight has asked on the registration form before the event. So Julia, would you like to start off with our first question?
Yes, thank you, Saxon. And I just want to add that the audience did a great job of asking questions. They're super interesting. And so the first one I want to pose to you three panelists is, how can the film production process be more respectful to the land and Indigenous communities?
I think by listening a lot. The film industry is a big behemoth that, you know, has a lot of money and a big megaphone, and they usually, I think, are used to just coming in and saying, here's how we do it. And oftentimes, I think, probably feeling like they're doing any group or person or community a favor just by like telling a story that involves them. I think like flipping that and, you know, listening and learning what the unique things about Native communities and any other community are, and serving those, because that way you tell the best story. There's I don't know, I guess a kind of irony, like a lot of times, you know, the thing about Natives is like, everyone's like, oh, you use the whole part of the buffalo, you use this, you know, it's just, but like, I think we are very holistic in our approach to things traditionally. A lot of times the film business is not. It is the opposite of that, where it comes in and says, oh, you've got this thing, we're going to take a few pieces of it, we're going to use that, that's all we're going to use, we discard the rest. That doesn't really matter because we're making a little 22 or 44-minute show or something that has to be trimmed and edited. But I think their understanding and hearing us when we say, like, you know, things are a little bit differently the way we traditionally do them, and that has value and can enrich what you're doing and tell these stories better. Because, you know, I think they usually, like we've said, they come out the other end of that oftentimes better informed, not just how to tell a better story about Natives, but, you know, just like when you go through a process in anyone else's shoes, you come out there better at being able to tell the rest of the stories that you're going to tell for the rest of your life. And I'll kick it over to Tazba. So maybe that'll help if we just like hand off as the.
Okay. So I think some of the ways that production can, the question was about respect. Was it about respecting or the communities during production?
Yeah, being respectful to the land and Indigenous communities during production.
Well, I think part of it is like, you should always acknowledge where you're shooting and whose land you're on. But in addition to that, write that community into that story. Like, it's really not that hard to like make that doctor Native, or make that like teacher, or make the girlfriend, or whatever. Like, every place in this country has Native people, whether you're in an urban setting or in a rural setting. And so like, anytime you see these shows taking place, it's like, it's really not that hard. Like, just make a Native character. You don't have to like tell some like big elaborate Native story. And I think on a production level, like, if you're in rural communities or in tribal communities, like, hire PAs who are Native. Like, the jobs that like that they can do, that you don't need to have like a ton of background to get started with, like, hire those people, hire them as your PAs, like have them on set if they're able to. Taika Waititi is a really great example. When he was shooting Thor Ragnarok in Australia, he hired Indigenous PAs to work on set, like as part of that major production. So I also think it's like, you know, as we move up and get more directors in film and TV, you know, we can make that choice to hire who we want, but it would be wonderful if the industry took it on themselves to also consider that. And I think also, like, when working with, if you are working on a story that involves a story of a tribal community, or you have a major character who is Native, I think it's really important to hire writers and consultants from that tribe. Like, there's clearly, we don't have 564 or 1,000 working writers. Like, we don't have that yet. But what we do have is, you do have Native writers in the room that can say, like, okay, well, I'm not this tribe, but what I can do is I will find a Native consultant from that tribe, and you bring, so that you know that you're also doing your due diligence to represent them like correctly, and to kind of not cater so much to like a pan identity. And so what's been cool is all the shows I worked on so far, like we've had either writers or consultants from the tribes that we're writing for, which is very cool because then no one comes for you.
I also just wanted to, for audience sake, can you say what a PA is?
Oh, that would be like a production assistant. So there are different forms of it. Like if you're in a writer's room, you have production assistants who help with like the scheduling of things or like getting lunch or, all kind of the more like logistical things. And then on set, that might be like a runner, like they may be able to, you see people on little golf carts, like taking people from place to place, or really they're there to assist the production in whatever need is there presents itself. It's a really great way to see what is happening, whether that's in a writer's room or on set.
That was my job. Like 20 years ago, writer's PA, getting coffee and lunches and being around writers and learning the craft. And it is a great job. It is also very low on the ladder. I think it was my first couple weeks in the job. I was out and someone ran a red light and T-boned my car, which had a giant box of soup behind it. And I spun around, soup was everywhere in my thing. So I called the show and said, hey, I just got, slammed, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, okay, is the food okay? And I said, not the soup, but the sandwiches. So they sent someone out from the show to pick the stuff up, left me there sitting on the curb for an hour while they took the stuff back and brought it back. And that is a true Hollywood story. But it does get better.
To add on to something I feel that production could do to be respectful, because I feel Taz was so on the money with, blending in just Native civilians into the story, just to be there, to just be like water. And land acknowledgement does so much. You get the whole crew together and you tell everybody what's going on. It does set a tone. Sydney Freeland, who directed episode 106, I believe, of Chambers, she even brought in her medicine man uncle, who ended up doing a prayer for the land that we were on. And I personally kind of loved the tension in the air during the prayer, because I really doubt, the cold, cynical Hollywood set was expecting to do anything of that kind of sentimental value to even acknowledge land, because, some people could be vapid. But so, yeah, all the sentiments that have been shared, definitely. And I guess I would definitely add, if someone's there to pray, that's so like, that's on the money for me.
Agree.
Thank y'all so much for sharing that. While y'all were talking, it just made me think of just how far our community has gone from even, I think the example that comes into my head right now is the 1972 Oscars, when Marlon Brando denied his Best Actor Oscar and allowed Sasheen Littlefeather to speak on the stage and to speak about Native rights and just how Hollywood was treating Native Americans at the time, and just the stark contrast between 1972 to 2020, 2021, really just the work that goes on behind the scenes. Jason, you were talking. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I actually have a personal relationship with Sasheen that I've developed, and we've gotten to know each other. I've gotten to hang out with her and just talk. And she is such an advocate for what she went through, which was atrocious, right. What they put her through, not just being blacklisted, but past that, right?
Right.
And she still has all the same passion and love. It brought me to tears that she felt, seeing me as an Apache woman do a lead role for a show such as Chambers. She told me that was something she's glad to have lived to see. And that was so heavy to hear from someone so grand who did something so like historical for our community. So yeah, so thank you for sharing your sentiments too, because like all that love is shared and it's totally work, you know what I mean? It's all like a labor of love.
Absolutely. And I was about to bring up that, Jason, even the little things of even just being a PA, and all those little things lead you to this big moment and to then a series of big moments as well. And really also appreciating the people that came before us that got us into these roles into the first place, or even made it easier for us to get through the door and to really strive to do the work that they did justice, because it was with the intent to make sure that folks in our community years after us are able to have that easier time and accessibility and visibility within the industry. And our next question from the audience is, if you could remake any classic film, what would it be and why?
Do you mind if I go? Okay, well, I've actually talked about this before. If I could remake any classic film with my native flavors, it would be Clueless, because I love Cher Horowitz and like, the character and like the whole conversation of, there's just so much within Clueless that made it the cultural movie that it is, that I would love to then translate. I'm talking about the teen girlness, that materialistic, real bright candy colored like world we all live in, but giving that flavor. That's something I've actually been totally like, I dream, I hope we see more native roles as such. Not to answer another question, but I'll get into it later.
I don't care if this is not considered a classic, because it is my classic, but I want to do an Indigenous Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. And I want it to star a native actress and Keisha Castle Hughes from Whale Rider. She's hilarious. And it would be like a Maori and Res girl from the States, and they got to go on this Indigenous Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion road trip.
That is a classic.
So I'm at a loss on this one, and I think it's probably because all of my brain cells right now are working on current projects, and I wouldn't be able to give a good answer. So if I think of one, I'll share it later. But but I want to see there too.
Don't worry, we can circle back to that. Those are all really interesting choices, and I think it's so great to just imagine that, and hopefully we'll live in a world where we get to see those and more. So the next question is, when creating content that will be viewed by non-native people, how do you determine what cultural information you share?
You determine by permission. So I think the community that you are writing for and about, I think this is why I think it's important to have a community connection as you're working, because what might be okay for my people might not be. And actually, because I'm 3 different tribes, like there's things that are not okay for me to do on my Navajo side, but then nobody cares on my Paiute side. So it's like, I think just like making sure that you have the permission of, and I don't mean you need to like go talk to every single tribal member or like, but it's like, that's why you want to have like a cultural consultant that's specific to that community. So you can say, hey, what is the way that you would do this? Or is it okay if we show that or not? And I think part of this too, I kind of honestly, this is a question I grapple with a little bit, because I know there are things that we want to keep to ourselves and we don't want people to see. And at the same time, I don't want to deny the reality that we live in, which my reality is that my culture is very entwined with my life off of the res. And that, for example, when I am going through a hard time, I'm gonna go to sweat. That's what I'm gonna do. And so I don't want to deny also the reality of a character doing something that we really would do. Now, I think there's a way to do that where you don't have to shoot inside, you don't have to show everything that happens, but I think you can show that this person, that is their healing mechanism, or is that is how they navigate the world around them. So I do think it's like this interesting thing where like, I'm not gonna be a person to say we can't show any of our culture, because the truth is it's not our reality. So I think it's like a combination of permission and also how can you tactfully show what you're doing without giving anything away. But I don't know. Sometimes I'm the one in the room. I'm like, show it, because I'm just like, we do that, you know, like we do these things. We do have ceremony. We do operate in the world in a certain way that which makes us unique and beautiful. And if we talk about being able to see ourselves in a character, I also want to see how a Native character prays and how they navigate their space in the world we're in. But you got to do it in a way that's not like disrespecting anybody or showing the things that we're not supposed to be showing.
As a San Carlos Apache woman, I have to ask if you've experienced the medicine men, you know, just viciously saying, do not even take pictures of any of this. That's something I've grown up experiencing, was that just even capturing it is wrong. But in the same way, there's a movie called, I think it's Men Who Stare at Goats. It's got like some real big boy actors I can't name right now. But there's a scene where they're delving into spirituality to then reach a deeper consciousness to get this mission done, blah, blah, blah. And they start piercing. They do Lakota Sundance piercing, and they show it on a white guy. And it made my heart stop, and it was gross. And I was like, oh God, no. I was like, see, that's where the line I feel gets drawn. Like, show it, but like, that's like, you know, like, that's like, they gotta know, you know. But I feel the same way about, like, there are secrets, but like just don't tell the secrets, but you can tell the story, you know. Like, don't worry. Don't instruct it.
Oh wait, you're on mute, Sivan.
It's a part of our reality. It's something we all share. Natives all have ceremony, some kind of ritual, something that ties us into our heritage. So yeah, you can't deny it. But so I totally agree. There's a total right way to do it, and then there's like the really offensive way.
Yeah. Like you don't want to like an instructional video. You know what I mean? You don't want to like give them enough away that people can like press pause and rewind and like, okay, and the next they take this, and next they do this. It's like we all know what it is watching it as Native people, and I think that's the people that it needs to resonate for.
Yeah, and I think having some just like practical discussions with everybody about it. Number one, make sure you're coming at stuff with good intention, and that you have, you know, involved people who know about the stuff from those tribes, but have a good conversation with everybody. And this is extra work, but it's kind of like what we've got to do. And that means having, because, you know, I always have to judge the kind of like character and tone of the folks involved with the project. And are these people we want to bring this to or not? Sometimes it's just not a fit and you just don't do it. I also think it helps to like really have an honest discussion with folks from the tribe and explain to them kind of like sometimes how things get out of our hands, or like, you know, it's not always going to be perfect on the screen, so that you're being honest with, and you know, and that folks reserve the right to step away from it. And I also think just like it's this difficult thing that we have in balancing as we get more involved and more of our stories are being told. I think, every year it's getting better. We're doing a better job. There are always going to be, you know, things that strikes and stuff we get wrong, and might not be the folks' fault who were doing it. Stuff might have just happened. But I think by and large, it's sort of like tilting, and, you know, I think that will continue to evolve, like we have with all kind of cultural things we've taken on, because as we have more and more of our people telling our own stories and being able to sort of experiment and take risks and do something new frontiers will be pushed. But, you know, basically just like a lot of communication, probably more communication than you do in other stuff.
Isn't trial and error just amazing?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it definitely is a really great thing to experience. But also, I think continuing our discussion, you know, we're talking a lot about what is currently present and what we have seen in the past when it comes to Native representation. But our next question is actually, where do you see the future of Native representation going in the media industry?
I am super optimistic about it for a lot of reasons, just like things like this, so we can have this amazing discussion with people, you know, from all over the place, and we get all these amazing questions. And, you know, just this wouldn't have been something that could have happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And then also just on the other side, that now creating stuff and distributing stuff, there's a big sea change going on. It's amazing, I think, especially for, like the more unique voices, it's just a huge, it's a huge boon to us, because, network TV 20 years ago, a lot of times they were not interested in something if it wasn't something they was like, would 30 or 40 million people turn into this on night one? Now it's completely different with streaming, and you can grow these like smaller projects that can become big, huge hits that might not have been something can get seen on YouTube that a kick-ass creative kid did for no money with their iPhone in their backyard, and that can be across the world in 2 days, and then they can launch a career and continue to create off that. So it's just like there's just really good technological things that are happening. I think at the same time with this, awakening of just like how cool it is that there are all these voices out there, and people are a lot more willing to, to go and partake. And, I haven't spent much time in London, but you always hear like, oh, however many years ago, it was like the worst food ever. It was just most boring stuff. And now they brought in all these people from all around the world, and it's like this amazing, just like kick-ass place where all these experiments and stuff is being done in the cross-pollination. And that's where we're at right now in entertainment. So it would be really exciting to be, I don't know, a 20-year-old driving around with soup in their car in Hollywood right now.
I think the future of Indigenous representation is going to be specific. Like, I think we're going to see a lot more specificity in the storytelling and in being tribally specific about story. I think it's going to be, they're going to be complex stories, they're going to be funny stories, and you're going to see a lot of characters who are not in a period piece, and a lot of contemporary stories, I think. And, I feel so lucky to be involved with 3 shows coming out this year that have major Native characters. And I think the most exciting thing to me about all of those is that they're all very different stories. And I think that's good in terms of the industry, because I don't think that you can say like, oh, our network already has one Native show. Because the truth is, like, between Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs, those are completely different shows. Like, you have like 4 res kids from Oklahoma who just got their res, and they're committing petty crimes. That is completely different than Rutherford Falls, where you have like a Native woman in her late 30s who has 2 master's degrees who's trying to start a cultural center. Like, they're not at all the same. And, and it's like, so I think what's exciting is that in the specificity, you get a lot more story diversity, which I think then you can't say there's only one Native show, or we can only do one Native show, because they're not going to be anything alike.
I love that, specificity. That's a word I'm going to keep in my vocabulary. Thank you, Tazbah. Something I'm definitely hoping to see in the future of Indigenous cinema, entertainment, music, writing is Indigenous creators, actors, personalities in non-Indigenous centric spaces. Cinderella played by a Native girl. We don't say it, but just let her be there and be gorgeous. Let us have this. You know what I mean? Like Terminator being Comanche. Like, why can't I have that? Like the just being in spaces, bringing the indigeneity. Something as an artist, I'm a gallery exhibited artist, and something I was questioned a lot. A question I heard a lot was, where do you feel with Indigenous imagery, symbolism? The traditional painting and traditional aesthetics that have existed in to be synonymous with Native, people in general. But I am a huge believer in, because I painted this is actually one of my paintings. It's Indigenous now. Guess what? This is now going to be considered San Carlos Apache aesthetics, whether someone tells me or not. I'm going to consider it that way. So I'm really just to hope seeing letting go of all these they're really trying to put us in a box. So just let us be out of the box. Let us explore. That's what I'm hoping to see in the future, is just the diversity in where you see Indigenous people.
Yeah, thank you for all for sharing your perspectives. And I think going off of this topic of trying to foster better Indigenous representation, our next question is, how can media consumers advocate for more Native representation as opposed to people behind the scenes? How can they do that?
I would say watch and support them. Now more than anything, people are empowered, audiences, to call out when something has done great and done a good job and share it and market it. I mean, it's like that's the big difference between now and however long ago. Like stuff can be given viability and life just from its audiences like sharing it. And I think one thing that is an advantage of our communities, because we're on the smaller side, if you look at it just in the numbers, but I think like Native communication amongst ourselves is like way better than a lot of other communities. And so by sharing and supporting and, letting people know when good stuff is being done, that gets noticed by, and it moves the needle on things. So, it's just like a really cool time where the audience has a lot of power, and that's never been the case before. And so, now let's take advantage.
I'm on the team of just accepting what you don't know sometimes, having an open mind. I think that's what audiences could really afford to have. I mean, it sounds like a pipe dream, sounds like something unrealistic to ask for now that I said it out loud. But I would love, again, you see an actor and you're confused. I don't know, I've never experienced this, but it feels like they see something, they're confused, then down goes a step to wherever the hell they run off to. When as an audience consumer, maybe you can just take the self-education, accept what you're seeing, and then work from there. That's something I hope to see in the industry.
Yeah, I love both. And also, I guess, because I would say those things, I already said them, I'll say something new, which is that as a consumer, if you're a non-Native consumer and you see some stuff that's like kind of whack by non-Native writers and creators, call that shit out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, cause networks and shows now, because of like social media, they respond. Like if there's a backlash to something, like, and I don't mean like get on like the train where you're just like all over the place, but I mean like if there's something that's like harmful to the Native narrative and representation, like the consumer has a lot of vocal power these days because of social media, where like prior to that, we were just all watching it in our homes on our TVs, but now you can get on and you can like tweet that person or that showrunner. And I'm not telling anyone to go crazy, but I'm just saying, like, if you see something that is wrong and isn't right and is a racist representation, like say something.
Boom, across the board.
So absolutely just agree with what Tazbah just said. And also even just listening to Native consumers that are the ones that go out of their own way to call that out on social media, especially just listen to what they're saying, because they're doing this out of their own time and energy, but also their own passion to make sure that their community is heard. And also, that being an ally as a consumer works in so many different multifaceted ways. And hopefully for a lot of non-Native folks in our audience tonight, it hopefully gives y'all some insight on social media advocacy and consumer advocacy when it comes to Native representation. And our final question before we end this discussion, sadly, is actually what Native projects should we as consumers be on the lookout for coming out within the next couple of years?
Resident Alien.
Tazbah is
Resident Alien comes out next Saturday on Sci-Fi. It's about an alien. There's some Native characters in it. Gary Farmer's in it. He plays a dad. And then I think like late spring, Rutherford Falls comes out. That has 5 of the 12 writers were Native writers, has the first female Native showrunner in the United States. The female lead is Native. The second lead is a Native man. Like your top two of the top 3 are Native characters. Half the cast is Native characters, very exciting. And then I don't know an air date yet because we start shooting in April, but then Reservation Dogs will be on FX. So Resident Alien Sci-Fi, Rutherford Falls in the spring on Peacock, and then Reservation Dogs on FX at some later date, but hopefully within 2021. And then of course, and Spirit Rangers, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, those I think are all the TV ones that are like, you know, and I know there's a bunch of stuff being worked on. I'll give a sort of non-specific shout out to a lot of stuff. And this is also a challenge to people, again, because I've been like yapping about the industry changing, but it really has. There's an opportunity now for, I think, a lot of great Native features to be made. And I'm hoping that we see that because the movie business has really changed. Movie theaters are not, you know, even open right now, but all these streamers are going to be doing stuff. And it did used to be a lot of times that it was like, you know, if it weren't an Avengers tentpole franchise that was going to make $1 billion and stuff, places would not necessarily make them. But now studios are going to be, you know, putting these things directly on their streaming services. So anyone out there dreaming of telling a story who has stuff that, you know, when you're looking at it, you're like, man, this should be a movie, or this is a thing. Like, now is the time. Get them out there, push them, support them, and you know, get those stories there, because honestly, a lot of stories make great TV shows, but there's also things that are just like amazing movies, and this is going to be the time now that Hollywood is getting back to making some of those type of movies, which will be great because they'll do them the right way.
Thank you.
Love everything everyone's been saying, because I agree, you know, keep an eye out for movies, literature, art, TV, YouTube, streamers. You know, the support just kind of has to go around as the Indigenous like umbrella just grows, you know, about like where we are finally being and taking space. I'm just going to go ahead and take this opportunity to go ahead and keep an eye out for my projects, because I want to do projects. I'm totally not going to spill the beans right now, but I'm doing projects. So, you know, maybe I will have things out there. So if you see Sivan Alyra Rose, I would appreciate the support.
Awesome. Okay. The other thing I was going to ask Jason that is related to Sivan in terms of acting, like if you also have an ambition to act, now is the time, because what happens with these shows is that the shows are coming and we need Native actors, like, because there's so many roles in these shows that, like, if you have any ambition to act, now is the time to start sending in your tapes and auditioning and like.
Because when Sivan can speak to this, but you know, when we were casting chambers and others, like now it's not like people have to be here. That's always been a real disadvantage for our communities. We have like all this amazing talent. It's spread all over the U.S. and Canada and Alaska. I mean, so, but now, I mean, you were casting shows, and it's enough to just say, boom, look at this, and there are people, you know, who are not in LA, like Sivan, who wow everyone, and then it's just like that is just a, and you don't even necessarily have to have an agent or a manager. I mean, talent just gets recognized. So yes, double down on that. And Sivan, you could probably tell us more about.
Funny thing about, I was actually in LA when I was auditioning for the Chambers process, but I still was completely low resourced. I had no manager, no agents. It was me doing all my own networking and, you know, finding space where I could audition. And I'm still auditioning to this day. I've auditioned for great roles and I hope something sticks soon. You know, I want to keep going, but if I could share a piece of advice for Indigenous youth on up, considering like branching into new career aspects, the only advice I have is to be yourself, to be courageous, and to be very kind when you can be, because it's a nasty little industry and it'll get to you. That means any industry. The word industry is so blah, but if you're going to get into it, again, with everyone else they have said, do it. Like it's so a path you can take.
Thank you for that advice. And actually, we do have more time for a few more questions, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask. Yes. And so I think going off of that, I know, Sivan, you kind of answered this, but what advice would you give to aspiring Indigenous filmmakers, screenwriters, or anyone trying to break into the film and media industry?
I would say try to balance two things as you advance. Number one, kind of like learning how the sort of like orthodox way that it's been done. And, you know, even if that's not always the most fun thing, kind of like delve into that and kind of learn those rules. You'll want to break them, but you want to have, you know, but then also from wherever you're coming from, whatever your voice and your medicine and your spirit is, stick just very, very loyally to that and advance that and find your own voice as you're doing those two things. It's very tough to do. So much of this stuff is about balancing stuff, but those are, you know, they're really the two things that I think can like keep you who you are and help you kind of like navigate the creative craft journey.
Yeah, and I would agree with Jason, like stick to the truth of who you are. Your voice is unique and you don't want that to ever go away, but also study structure and study the formula of like, if you're trying to be a feature writer, if you're trying to be like a TV writer, and it doesn't mean you have to go to film school. I didn't go to film school, but what I did do is when I made this leap, I enrolled myself in like screenwriting classes and filled in my gap. So also looking at yourself and saying, what do I have and what do I not know yet? So it's like, I take a class every quarter at a college in LA, just out of my own pocket to learn how, like, okay, I need to learn feature structure. I need to learn like 30-minute comedy structure. I need to learn how to direct actors on camera. Like, so be willing to like invest in your own skill set and never stop learning. And part of that is watch a ton of film and television and like study it. Like I have watched, like when I was trying to write a pilot, I watched a lot of pilots and I had my laptop out and I was literally writing scene by scene to see if I could understand their act structure. And you don't have to be that, I mean, I'm that's just like how I work. But the point is like, study the craft of what you want to do. And like Jason said, then stick to your voice and you just like put your voice into that structure. But yeah, it's hard work, but I think it's not hard work in the way people sometimes think. I think it's in like a lot of like the details of just honing that craft.
Tazbah, your enthusiasm is infectious. I'm very glad that I've gotten to hear your sentiments on this panel. I think you have great insight, just as much as Jason. So I'm really happy to have both of y'all's insight on this. And to I would like to say that I also advocate for the self-education through whatever your career endeavor. All throughout Chambers, which was about a 5-month filming process, I was watching screenplay breakdowns. I was reading tons of books. I was reviewing all of these things to build character, to then have screen resonance, to then feel the tone of the room and to be your own. There was so much I had to do as a newer actor coming in that I wanted to do though, which is something, you know, you're gonna, if to anyone listening, and if you're trying to go into things and it does get hard and you are hitting brick walls and it's totally annoying, make sure you still are preserving the love that you have for it through that educating, that it should be something you enjoy doing, is taking those steps. Like it's got to be a labor of love, and that's how you create something genuine, and that's how you're okay with it if it gets canceled. Because that's how I totally like coped with the cancellation of Chambers, was that I don't care. I did something I'm very proud of, and I know I gave an honest effort.
Thank y'all for your responses. And also real quick, I'm so sorry, I jumped the gun with the time and everything. Time has been a construct over here in my apartment. And so I have not been paying attention. Like I see the clock and it just does not process in my head. But moving on to our next question, actually, what is y'all's favorite TV show right now and why?
I May Destroy You. Sorry, I just jumped the gun on that one because if you have not watched it yet, it is so good. I love it so much. Michaela Cole is like a genius. She writes it, she directs it, she is the lead in it. If you haven't watched it or you've been like scrolling past it on HBO, good. To me, it is like one of the most real, raw ways a woman has been depicted in a TV show. So that's my recommendation.
Just wrote
my
it
favorite.
down. My recommendation is Schitt's Creek. Totally almost done with the whole thing right now because as I can relate to the character David Rose being a goth pansexual, just tied up in the throes of small life, because that was basically me growing up in high school in a small town near my reservation. So yeah, Schitt's Creek is my vote.
I'll pull two things. I'd say like What We Do in the Shadows is really cool because it took something that was like an old construct and gave it a really new, cool spin.
Binged it.
And one of the other cool things about it, and this is just sort of like some practical advice, it's one of those shows that show, like, this is like Schitt's Creek too, where it shows just like you don't have to spend a ton of money. You just have like great vision and creative folks, and you do something like really fresh and neat, and that's compelling. I guess on the drama side, something that resonated with me was like The Boys on Amazon, because it took something that was like, I was like, do we really need another superhero show or whatever? And it kind of like applied this like really kind of sense of now smartassery to it, and it's just as much satire as it, and it's taking something that like, a lot of us probably thought was like fairly played out for right now and gave it a fresh spin. And so like when I look at shows like that, it's inspiring because I want to see those things happen with other content of, thing, and we all have our ideas for that. So yeah, when shows inspire you to be like, that is, could be applied to other cool areas, that's really neat to me.
Thank you. I know I was really looking forward to that question because it also reminds us that while you work behind the screen and behind the scenes, you are also media consumers as well. And so unfortunately we have to wrap up, but is there anything else you would like to share before we end the panel?
I would say thank you everybody for coming out to watch this thing, and there was thank you to the organizers. It was extraordinarily well organized. It was this is really energizing to us because sometimes like as writers, I think we're kind of looking at our screens falling asleep and stuff, and we're inspired, we want to keep going, but like stuff like this is just like really exciting and re-inspiring. So I think all of us are going to jump back onto our projects now, kind of boosted by the energy and enthusiasm of the questions in this event. But yeah, I mean, everything we're talking about and stuff, like we're just kind of lucky enough to be holding this baton right now, and we really are hoping and knowing that we're going to pass it on to people who are going to do some really amazing stuff. So help each other out and just really keep striving on that, because I'm excited to not have to be watching anything in like 25 years and just watching the great stuff that you guys are making.
I guess I would like to say thank you again for having me here and organizing such an amazing panel with amazing questions. I love doing these things for community and with community. And then to add on top of that, I guess I will say Black Lives Matter, free Palestine, and protect Indigenous women always.
Everything they said. I thank you. This has been awesome. What y'all missed was in the waiting room, I was telling them I had like just gotten out of the shower because I'm actually submitting a script for Reservation Dogs today. It's due today. It's also my birthday, so I've been like trying to like type and then look at like birthday messages. And so this has been really fun. Like there's no other place, honestly, like when Julia sent me the email about this and I was landing on my birthday, I was like, for sure, like there's honestly nothing I would rather do on my birthday than talk about Indigenous narratives, with people who are, intelligent and smart, and I have so much to learn from. So this has been awesome. It's the greatest birthday gift I could have had. So thanks for coming to my birthday party, which you didn't know.
I'm so glad to be here. Everybody can follow Tazbo on Instagram.
This really is the most exciting part of all of our Friday nights, because now we're going to go and do like creative stuff alone in front of our screens, but it's been cool seeing everybody.
I got inspired by y'all. Thank you.
And that shows you how cool it is to do stuff that you can eventually see on screen. You're willing to spend your Friday night or your birthday alone doing it because it's that rewarding when you get to see it come to life. So.
Well, thank you so much, panelists, for this very amazing, empowering discussion. And once again, happy birthday, Tazbah. I hope your birthday is good and everything. Maybe eat some cake while you write your script. I don't know. Combine it all together. Multitask, all that beautiful stuff. And
I'll be like typing and like eating like cake at the same time. I'll be like this.
Yes, love that. And just as a reminder, tonight's event was recorded and will be uploaded to the American Indian Resources Center's YouTube channel, where we will be sharing a via email with everyone who registered for tonight's event. And if you'd like to keep in touch with the SUA, the American Indian Resource Center, Sinai, or Career Success, we have Facebook, Instagram, and newsletters all listed on the presentation slide that Julia is so generously sharing with us tonight. And also, if you're interested in a career in media, please reach out to Christine Hall, who is UCSC's career coach at chmhall@ucsc.edu. That is chmhall@ucsc.edu.
Thank you. And also, please be sure to complete the event evaluation form. We would really appreciate your feedback so we can continue to improve our events. And the link to the eval will be posted in the chat, along with, I think, Christine's email. And lastly, being here tonight.
Happy to be here.
Yes, take care. Stay safe, everyone. And have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Have a good one.